Emojis and Narcissism. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Emojis. You probably use them. I don't. Whilst I recognise that they're utilised as a shorthand, sometimes for things that are obvious, sometimes for things that are less obvious, whereby emojis have been commandeered by certain subgroups within society to have alternative meanings, I don't use them. Principally because I'm not 12 years old. But that's just my view. Nevertheless, they're inescapable, and they're seen all around, utilised in people's communications, and then, further afield, entering into merchandise. But what connection do emojis have to narcissism? Well, from my perspective, none whatsoever, because as I've just explained, I don't use them. However, there is a suggestion that emojis convey something else in relation to people. Rhys Blakely, writing for The Times, explained, "You may fondly imagine that tacking on a cheerful smiley face," shows the emoji, "will convey breezy affability, or that a rakish," and it's the emoji with sunglasses and smile, "suggests a devil-may-care swagger. Alas, you could be gravely mistaken. Research suggests that peppering your messages with these symbols may be less a testament to your sunny disposition and more a window into your darker psychological recesses." Since their introduction in 1999, emojis have become an inescapable feature of human communication, infiltrating everything from casual texts to corporate memos. Psychologists have now set themselves the task of decoding what lies beneath these digital hieroglyphics. The results suggest that a person's emoji habits can discuss more than they intend. The study questioned 285 undergraduates with an average age of about 20 about their use of 40 symbols. Now, halting there, that doesn't strike me as a particularly representative research group, given the fact that they have an average age of about 20 and only 285 were used, and they're all taken from undergraduates. But that point made, let's find out what the findings are. The participants also completed questionnaires designed to reveal their personality traits. The results show that among males, heavy emoji use was linked to Machiavellian tendencies and neuroticism, characteristics associated with manipulativeness and mood swings. Now, pausing there, in this study, therefore, heavy emoji use means Machiavellian tendencies and neuroticism, or is it one or the other? And if so, which? Sadly, no answer is given. For women, a fondness for emojis was tied to narcissism. In other words, a man who eagerly fires off emojis may covertly be trying to bend you to their capricious will, while a woman drowning her messages in hearts and sparkles might be seeking to burnish her personal brand. Well, pausing there, I wouldn't suggest for a moment that just because you're a man and you use a lot of emojis, that demonstrates that you have Machiavellian tendencies. What might be accurate is that there are those that behave in a Machiavellian way that do use emojis. But I would actually suggest that that Machiavellian behaviour, which is found amongst the greater narcissist, would equate to less use of emojis rather than suggesting that it is something that is more prevalent. But of course, if they're just talking about tendencies rather than being Machiavellian in itself, there is a distinction there. But tendencies, what does that mean? It tells us nothing, really. You might have a tendency to eating a cream cake, which means you have one every month. That would hardly be regarded as something that is sustained, but it is still a tendency. Or do you mean that you have a tendency to eating cream cakes twice a day? Well, that is far more prevalent. Unfortunately, the article and the study is lacking in explaining what the extent of that tendency is. Similarly, It would follow that somebody that burnishes their communications with lots of emojis could be seen to be showing off, which would be utilizing the traits of vanity for the purposes of their communications, which is a narcissistic trait, but it certainly doesn't mean that the individual is a narcissist. The problem with articles such as these is that if people don't apply critical thinking, what they end up doing is thinking, oh, my man sends me lots of emojis, he's Machiavellian. Or, wow, my sister uses tons of emojis, she's a narcissist. It is, of course, not actually saying that, but rather it doesn't seem to be saying much at all. Overall, women used emojis more liberally than men, possibly because they use social media and text messaging more. There was, however, a small subset of 6 emojis that were used more by men, including the pile of poo, the exploding head, and the face screaming in fear. We can only speculate as to the nuanced emotional states being conveyed. Previous studies have suggested that introverts most often reach for the symbols. Not so, said the new research, which has been published in the journal Current Psychology. Among both males and females, extroverts were the most enthusiastic users. The findings join a growing body of scholarship on smiley faces and facepalm icons. Another paper published in 2019 found that students were far more likely to respond well to a task from an academic who used emojis. However, reinforcing the adage that familiarity breeds contempt, they are also more likely to doubt the teacher's competence. In 2018, a survey suggested that more than a third of British adults believed that emojis were to blame for the deterioration of the English language. Beyond providing fuel for anxious self-reflection, the latest results may carry implications for marketers, campaigners, and others interested in the dark arts of persuasion. I can tell you that it would not be a go-to for me to use an emoji for the purposes of manipulating somebody. Yes, if I recognised that there was somebody that used a lot of emojis, I might, if I saw no other way of doing so, mirror them with the use of emojis as to establish a line of communication. But I certainly wouldn't see it as a go-to with regard to the purposes of them being utilised for the purposes of the dark arts of persuasion. Far from it. I would be much rather thinking this is going to convey me as a quarter wit by using lots of emojis, rather than the fact that I'm a very intelligent man. Apparently, it's stated that increasingly companies are mining the contents of social media posts to estimate information about social media users' characteristics, and emojis could, they believe, furnish valuable clues for psychographic profiling, the practice of targeting individuals based on their innermost traits, whether for selling consumer goods or shaping voting behaviour. For now, the analysis of emojis is something whereby it remains relatively rare in such efforts, but in the future your choice of a wink over a thumbs up may help determine which adverts you end up seeing. Well, the suggestion that your use of emojis has a link to Machiavellianism or narcissism doesn't seem to me to have much strength behind it. Undoubtedly, there will be those who are narcissists that use emojis, and they will use it to manipulate. But their use of emojis doesn't denote that they are a narcissist. It's simply the case that they are a narcissist that is using emojis in the same way that lots of people have sex. Just because you have sex, that doesn't mean you're a narcissist. But someone who's established as a narcissist will use sex as a means to draw fuel. Accordingly, I don't think that anything can be read into the use of emojis to tell you something about the individual vis-a-vis them being a narcissist or not. Simply, where we determine that somebody is a narcissist by the use of much more reliable criteria, it may well be the case that an established and confirmed narcissist will use emojis for the purposes of manipulation in the same way that confirmed and established narcissist uses flattery, or uses sex, or uses charm, or uses self-pity, etc. Once again, it's important to apply critical thinking to articles such as these, for whilst it might have been meant lightheartedly, they have the potential to mislead, causing people to think that just because somebody uses a lot of emojis and they're female, that they may well be a narcissist, when clearly that's not accurate. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.